Hello, everyone. Welcome to 1.5 Degrees, the podcast where together we explore the science, solutions, and stories involved in the fight against climate change. I'm your host, Heidi Pan, speaking with the professionals behind the latest research, policies, culture, and innovations shaping our response to global environmental challenges. For today's episode, we are joined by Stacy Savage, aka the Texas Trash Talker, who has been a recycling nerd for 20 years and played a key role in passing two key pieces of statewide recycling legislation and several City of Austin business recycling ordinances. She founded Zero Waste Strategies in 2013 and has worked since with international corporations, municipal governments, and nonprofit institutions to reduce waste for sustainable operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stacy. It's such an honor.
Hey, Heidi, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being on your show today.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess just to start, could you tell us more about what it is that you do with Zero Waste Strategies?
Yeah, so I founded Zero Waste Strategies way back in 2013. So we're coming up on year 11 in January. And we're an environmental consulting firm, and we specialize in zero waste and circular economy protocols, meaning we help businesses, local government official or local government agencies, and institutions like higher education campuses, and hospitality and medical facilities reduce waste so that they can realize more cost savings and that they're able to empower their employees, get their buy-in, as well as build their brand affinity, their customer loyalty. And all of this is driven by a green marketing edge.
Like, what are some of the usual questions that you help companies work through? And I'd love to go into more like specific examples more later on too.
Well, one is, where do we start?
Yeah,
A lot
that's a
of
good
businesses
question.
are like, you know, I deal with sustainability, but I don't know anything about waste reduction. I know a lot about energy conservation and water conservation. I'm LEED certified, but I don't know the first thing about
Mhm.
how to conduct a waste audit or how to look at the purchasing departments, their purchasing habits, and how do we get employee buy-in. So what we offer is a one-stop shop for zero waste operations. And we always start with that baseline measurement, that data gathering called a waste audit. And
Mhm.
I'm not joking when I say we are spending 6 hours up to our elbows in someone else's trash. We are picking through the trash stream, the recycling stream, and the food waste composting stream as well. If you have all three. If not, we'll do what you have on hand. But this way we can go through and make sure that what we're pulling out is actually the materials that's supposed to belong in that stream. And
Mhm.
if not, we can collectively identify cross-contamination issues. So if we find a lot of trash and food in the recycling stream, then we got a problem. If it's
Mhm.
vice versa, where we're finding a lot of missed recyclables that were accidentally trashed into the landfill stream, we got a problem. So this way we deconstruct the entire waste stream to get down to the real nitty gritty. And I'm talking down to the gum wrappers,
Yeah, yeah.
so that we can figure out and weigh and catalog and video and take photos. And then once we're done with that, we clean up and then we go back to our headquarters here in the Austin area, and we develop out a report that not only categorizes and details all the visualizations of the graphing and the charting and the data
Mhm.
analysis, but then will detail as well as observations and recommendations to lessen waste, increase your recycling. And a lot of times we'll put in that kind of master plan, the implementation pieces as well. How do you implement better training? How do you
Mhm.
implement better education? How do you get the employees to buy in? So we'll give them all sorts of different ways to implement the strategies in order to attain the goals that the company has set forth. um, a lot of times we'll interview key players. Maybe it's the management team, maybe it's the employees that head up the green team,
Mhm.
but we need to get the perspectives of key people who either run the programs, or set enforcement for the programs, people who deal with the recycling, landfill, and compost haulers. Maybe it's
Mhm.
the facilities and janitorial crews. So we'll come in and do interviews with them. We'll get those key insights. We'll gain little nuggets of wisdom from them, and any brilliant ideas, innovative ideas that they may have that they want to see
Mhm.
implemented at their own, on their own floor, or maybe it's something that can be eventually developed to encompass the entire building. So it's just every business is different, every waste stream is different, every uh, sector is different, meaning all the employees from that particular community are going to be different. So it's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
a customized approach that we
Mhm.
take in order to help them address the waste issues, the contamination issues, the training, the key insights, and then help them, based on all that data, figure out a green marketing strategy that's going to work for them in order to edge out the competition.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. I mean,
It's
I
fun
also
too.
yeah, no, I'm sure. Our school actually did a like, we're starting this process ourselves, and we did a
Nice.
waste audit. Yeah, we're trying to scale it up a bit, but yeah, no, for sure.
Well, let me know if
Uh,
you need some help.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'd also like I'm just curious to know, because you call yourself the Texas trash talker. So, I mean, like, you were born and raised in Texas, and like you said that your family has worked at oil and gas refineries. I'm really
Mhm.
curious, like, yeah, how did you get from that background to then becoming an eco activist and founding zero waste strategies?
Yeah, well, growing up under the brown hazy skies and rotten egg smells of Southeast Texas near the Louisiana border on the Gulf Coast is really the mecca of the oil and gas industry for this
Mm,
country, and that's where a lot of exports go out. Um, my own parents worked for collective 75 years at Chevron and Texaco. Uh,
mm,
my cousins, aunts, uncles still work at these refining plants, and you know, unfortunately, that's really the only lucrative job sector in that area.
mhm,
You either work out at the plant, or you work at a Walmart.
mhm,
How can
mhm.
you put three kids through college on a Walmart salary? So
Right.
that's going to getting involved in plant life, I guess you could call it. Um, really sets you up for a career long term
Mhm.
and helps families, stay afloat and to be able to
Yeah,
save
yeah.
for retirement. And then,
Mhm.
of course, with the, all the college payments as well.
Yeah.
So it really, I'm sure you can understand being in that
Mhm.
position
No, for
now.
sure.
But so, I don't, unfortunately, my family was complicit in the pollution of our
Mhm,
community,
mhm,
as many, many other families are. And you don't blame them, though. I don't blame anyone in my
mm.
family for seeking out, a better, um, a better life that was,
Mhm.
supported by higher income.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody could fault anybody else for
Mm,
that. What a key thing that a lot of people don't know is that in that area there is a very unspoken agreement
mhm,
between the refinery workers, the local government, and the polluting corporations, and it's don't rock the boat,
mm,
don't speak up, don't take on action for policy to regulate us. Those kinds of things that could really shake things up. And there are some shakers out there that are moving the needle on more air quality protections and such, water quality as well. But I mean, you just look. Not even 2 days ago, there was an explosion just north of Houston
mm.
and in Shepherd, and it was like a 5 mile radius of a complete shut in. Like lock
Yeah.
your doors, seal your windows, don't turn on your AC. And so we've got some serious, very volatile
Mhm, mhm,
contaminants in the local area, even in 2023. So whenever I graduated high school, way back when, I moved up to the Dallas area. I went to college at UT Arlington, and it opened my eyes and broadened my horizons, but I
mhm.
really didn't catch the activism bug until I moved to Austin in 1999. And so I was flinging fajitas and serving margaritas at a local Mexican restaurant, and I was really good at it because I could talk the ear off of anybody, and no matter where you came from or what you believed in, I could find common ground. But I
Mhm,
think that really set me up for being able to um, go into my next career. After 9 years of being in the food and beverage industry, I hung up my apron and I found activism. So on the
Mhm.
back of the Austin Chronicle, which is the local weekly circular down here, there was a ad in the back of the paper that said, "Get paid to fight the man."
Mm.
And I was like, "Cool, who's the man?" You know,
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was not politically motivated. I was not politically educated. We didn't talk
Mhm.
about these
Mhm.
things around the dinner table growing up. We didn't talk about voting rights. We didn't talk about,
Yeah.
right to quality of life, air quality, environmental protection, justice issues. We didn't talk about any of that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then, even in my college days, it was party, 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 party. Like, we didn't have time for that. It's a little
Yeah.
different now that we have the internet around, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was pre-internet. So, there's a lot to be said that, whenever you find kind of that calling and you just
Mhm.
know it's a right fit. I stayed with the activism job for 9 years, and I literally knocked on doors all across Texas. I've talked to tens of thousands of people yearly, where, we just sat there and talked at their front doorstep and did neighbor to neighbor outreach and help people understand that they have a say, that their voice matters, that they need to be educated on these issues. They need to be empowered around how to hold government agencies as well as corporate polluters accountable. And that's exactly what we
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
So we organized communities. And not only that, we were able to take that organized voice and go lobby at the city council, at the
Mhm.
state capitol, and we had thousands of people behind us from across the state. It wasn't just in a couple of districts.
Yeah.
This was where we would go out and canvass all 181 districts of the Texas legislature. We were out in West Texas. We were up in the Panhandle. We were down in the Valley near Brownsville. There's you name it, we were there, and we were telling people these are the issues that we care about. Do you care about them too? Great, join us. And
Mhm.
so we were getting signatures on petitions, donations monetarily. We were getting people to write letters to their lawmakers, literal handwritten letters, not a tweet. We were
Mhm.
getting people to write pages and pages of letters to
Mhm.
their
Mhm.
lawmakers, and it really made a big impact. And what we were able to do with that is work with Dell in 2007 on the statewide computer take-back law, and that required equipment manufacturers, the OEMs like Apple, Dell, HP, to take back and recycle responsibly and for free their old or busted computers,
Mhm.
and do that responsibly for their consumers. So we repeated the victory in 2011 because we got televisions
Mhm.
also. So we worked with Panasonic to get a bill passed in the state legislature, and it was
Wow.
overwhelming support from a highly, highly conservative state legislature.
Mm.
And so those were a couple of huge victories that I had a played a key part in, but also at the local level in Austin, helping drive the business recycling ordinance that requires all businesses to recycle, and the plastic bag ordinance. Keeping plastic bags out of the checkout lanes
Mhm.
across the city, composting for residential uh, customers, where they have a 3-bin system now: trash, recycling, composting, and also construction and demolition debris, which is the bulk of what's heading to landfills. All the concrete and the shingles and the sheetrock and all the wood
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
that you can think of. It's a lot of it is taking up a lot of landfill space. So we were able to get those ordinances passed as well. Um, and then one day I was just sitting in the car waiting to turn on at the light in my neighborhood, and it just
Mhm.
smacked me right upside the head. And I was in a daydream, right? I was just like, la la la, waiting for the light to
Yeah.
change right
Yeah.
next to the grocery stores right there, and I'm gonna go run my errands. And then it just hit me like, Stacy, you don't have anywhere to move up in this organization. The executive director has been there for 25 years and she ain't going
Mhm.
anywhere. Like, that's her
Yeah.
baby, right? And I'm like, I've already moved up to all the places that I can go within this organization. What else can I do?
Mhm.
And so that's whenever I just said to myself, you need to start a business. And I never,
Mm.
ever, 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 ever thought that I would be an entrepreneur.
Mm.
But the very next day, I went down to the Travis County Courthouse and I dropped my $17 and I got my DBA. And it was the best money I've ever spent, because 11 years later, here we are, you know, helping these very corporations change their policies and their procedures from the inside. Rather
Mhm.
than being on the outside pointing my finger and saying, you're
Right.
doing this, I can work with the internal structures now. And I can say, let's do this, this, and this instead. So it's very impactful, and it's a great way to build a lot of business relationships and give people a totally different perspective,
Mhm.
especially myself.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I mean, just first and foremost, thank you for rocking the vote internally that way. That's super cool. Yeah, it's something I've thought about for some time. I mean, I just like the amount of challenges that you must have like had to navigate though, especially just in starting a business and even before that, like with the legislation process and like I
Mhm.
guess like could you tell me about some of those challenges and how did you navigate those?
Well, the challenges with the legislative process, let me tell you, things move very slow in Texas
Mhm.
and even slower for environmental legislation.
Everywhere in
And
this country,
so,
honestly. Yeah.
yeah, and the conservative legislature
Mm,
needs to see the environment of the economic impacts of a piece of legislation, right? And they need to
mhm,
see industry support for it as well. And so that's exactly what we had to do.
mhm,
Um, we literally went door to door and we knocked on doors around Dell's home in Austin. And we
yeah.
talked to all his neighbors. And then we went to Round Rock, which is where Dell is headquartered, just north of Austin. And we talked to all the neighbors there, right? And a lot of them worked for Dell, and they were like, "Oh, I can't sign your petition." I'm like, it's confidential. Nobody's going to see your particular signature. It stays in a box, and we go and deliver those boxes to
Mhm,
state lawmakers in your district. Your employer's not going to see it. And so they were like, "Oh, okay." And so we were able to get folks to, and because we were a nonprofit, we didn't have to reveal who our donor list was,
yeah.
right? So they could also give, and they could do so anonymously, whether they wanted to do cash or, if they wanted to write a check,
Mhm,
we were legally allowed to keep that anonymous. So people felt, once we explained that, people felt a lot more comfortable. But in the
mhm,
beginning, it was really rough trying to
yeah.
get people that worked at Dell involved. That's kind of like the whole, it mirrored the issues that we had down in Southeast Texas when it's
Mm,
you don't go up against the big boss. So anyway, we were able to gather about 50,000 members across the state, and we headed into the legislature. Um, and we first introduced computer take back recycling law in 2003, and we got bipartisan support, right? Both
mhm,
sides of the aisle, they were like, yeah, this is a good idea. But we didn't have Dell's support yet. We didn't have
mhm,
any electronic manufacturer support. So that bill kind of like died in committee.
mm,
It didn't go anywhere, right? So we reintroduced it in 2005. Granted, Texas has one legislative session every other year on odd numbered years, right? So we just had a
yeah.
legislative session. We won't have another one until January 2025.
Mm,
So it's kind of like a feeding frenzy, even to get
yeah.
legislation introduced, to find your bill sponsors, to find co-signers and all, and then to work it through the committees and get it on the House floor for a hearing, for a vote, another vote, a third vote, finally get it onto the governor's desk. So it's a long,
Mm,
arduous process, and it took us 3 sessions to finally get that 2007 legislation on then Governor Perry's desk, and
mhm,
he signed it, and it was a unanimous vote in the House
mm, mhm,
and the Senate. So we went, we considered that a big victory. It's because Dell was backing us, and they're the largest
mhm, mhm,
employer in Central Texas. So they were on board. So we're all the legislators. Good economic impact. It'll help the environment. Okay, great. Industry's behind it. So are we. So that's kind of, we had to really change the tide, and Dell finally responded because we had organized so many neighbors in the area, and it started a buzz, and we were
yeah,
getting
you gotta get
letters.
personal.
Yeah, people were drafting letters to their
Mm,
boss, basically, and we were
oh,
sending these letters to his home address, because previously he said, "I'm not getting any letters. What are you talking about?" He was being shielded
mhm,
by his PR team or whatnot. So we were like, okay, we found out where he lived, and we changed the address on
mm,
the letter writing flyer and said, "This is where we're sending them." So we did. We started sending them to his house, and then he finally started to listen. He would grant us meetings. We would start to be able to meet with him and his team, and really start to map out what this legislation needed to look like. But it was because the grassroots pressure in the local area and across the state that was really giving us the leverage that we needed in order to get such a huge CEO to the table, and to have them then eventually cooperate with us and collaborate to move this legislation along. So that was a really fun ride. experience. There was a lot of pitfalls and a lot of a lot of lows and highs and all that. But once we finally got that through, it was something that could be mirrored and replicated, which is what we did 2 years later with the or 4 years later with the TV take back law with Panasonic. So
Wow. Yeah, no, just and you speaking about that, just the journey, gosh, like I remember studying just how like we had practice looking into the lobbying process and the legislative process, and it's just, understandably you gotta take things, you gotta take your time and, make sure everything's like legit. But at the same time that we need to get a move on at this point in time. So, but yeah, no, just thank you
yeah,
for working through that yourself. Yeah. And
we
I
we had
mean,
great leadership,
mm,
within the organization, and I was just a lowly door knocker. I was just getting out there every night, knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, we have a huge issue. Tons of toxic electronics are ending up in our Texas
yeah.
landfills that we pay for as citizens, as with our tax dollars for the cleanup. Like, this is not fair. Join us," kind of
Mhm,
thing.
mhm.
So, but with
Yeah.
starting a business, yeah, I went in kind of not, I had zero idea what I was doing. And I just followed my intuition. I interviewed tons of people that were in the industry already who could give me, proper guidance, some suggestions. But, um, you know, it was really building those connections within the industry
Mhm.
that allowed me my very first really large contract with a major pet food maker here in the U.S. And I said yes to the contract, and I figured it all out as I went along because I didn't know what I was doing, and I
Yeah.
had to wear all the hats. Right? You got to
Mhm,
wear
mhm.
the legal, you got to wear the taxes, you got to wear the marketing, you've got to not forget to sleep and eat, those kinds of things. So it really took us a little while to gain some traction, but it was because of those industry network connections that I was able to build out through interviewing, doing market research interviews, and going to conferences and all that, being able to really develop that kind of web of support that I could call upon, whenever I needed advice or whenever I had a contract and I could bring these people in on the contract with me. I can get them paid
Mhm,
as well.
mhm.
And then they would return the favors. So we would go back and forth. And so I'd say that anyone who's just starting a business or, feels like they have a business, but they don't exactly know what they're doing, always say yes first and then figure it out later second.
Yeah, no, I have to completely agree with that. There's been many moments like that in my personal journey, and I mean, I have to say, like, is there, like, any advice you have for that networking process in itself? And, like, I guess, like, what is some of the best advice that you've
Mm.
ever heard, in networking or working with leaders?
Ask a lot of questions, and you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Use them accordingly. Because those key golden insights, those little nuggets of inspiration and information are going to be some of the things that you'll see later down the road, how it just kind of falls into place. You're like, oh, this is what so and so was talking about three
Yeah.
months ago,
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so there's always, and I'm a big believer in intuition and how things just, there's no such thing as coincidences. Things are always going to work out for you.
Mm.
You just kind of have to keep believing that this is what you want and this is what you're striving for and it's going to come. So just not giving up, um, it was a big deal, and making sure that it's something you're highly passionate about.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Thank you so much. Like, I mean, what is now some of like your favorite aspects of what you do, and or maybe even some least favorite aspects, and like what keeps you
Mm.
passionate?
Well, I think doing podcasts like this and doing the
Mm,
outreach and education, next week I'll be speaking to the local city council on, spearheading zero waste initiatives out here in little,
mhm,
this tiny little rural town that could really, um, it could really use some optimization. They
mhm.
could use some cost saving approaches,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's the people who are in office or the people who are heading up the departments within that city government aren't quite up to speed on
Mhm.
what's these zero waste protocols that have been happening in other cities nearby, but just not here just yet. And a lot of that comes with a lack of capacity, and not for lack of understanding, or people are it's not because there's not a want to move forward on
Mhm.
these issues. There's a lack of capacity. A lot of times,
Yeah.
some people just don't have the bandwidth in order to research and do the really heavy lifting and apply for the grants and then you got to factor in the community pushback. Or taxpayers going to even want to do this? You've got to put the focus groups together and get the businesses
Yeah.
involved. And a lot of times it's a lot of heavy lifting. And yeah, the capacity issue for a lot of smaller local governments is just not there. There's a major lack with that being short staffed and people already being overloaded in the jobs they
Yeah.
already have. So um, there's being able to go out and do public speaking at conferences, television, radio, whatever I can do in order to help people understand that it doesn't take a lot of money to get started. There are things that you can do in the very beginning that don't require any money.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
or maybe you can do an in-house education campaign where your design team pulls something together and it's something that goes out to the entire community, and just maybe even just like a little insert in the utility bill. That's something that cities can do. Might cost a little
Mhm.
bit of money, but not much. But what you have to do is make sure that the education piece comes first. You can't put the cart before the horse. Unfortunately, you can't roll out
Yeah.
programs and then be like, hey, citizens, oh, yeah, by the way, there's this thing you should know about that you're paying for. So there really needs to be proper planning. There needs to be education and implementation before the program rolls out so
Mhm.
people know what's coming and how to use the program properly so we can mitigate those cross contamination issues that I was speaking of earlier.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good point. Um, yeah, and I mean, like to me personally, that like link between, like being zero waste or just truly sustainable and like then, profitable, it's like pretty logical, but then, like as you said, it's not entirely obvious how that can be for a
Mhm.
lot of businesses. So like in getting to that conclusion feasibly, like what does that conversation like look like?
Well, I think for businesses, one key thing that helps get businesses on an even playing field is policy.
Mm,
And unfortunately, there's a lot of stick over carrot that comes with that.
yeah.
But whenever businesses are profit driven and they don't see the value in being more efficient with their waste streams and their purchasing habits and making these internal changes and getting their employees on board, it seems like a burdensome activity.
Mm,
And a lot of times they don't understand the connection between economy and environment, how they can't butt heads anymore, right?
mhm,
They have to go
mhm.
hand in hand. If you have a business that uses natural resources, but you've depleted them all, you don't have a
Right.
business anymore. It's
Yeah,
gone.
yeah. It's just
So
the yeah.
it's it's so a lot of businesses don't quite realize they haven't connected the dots
Mhm.
between the economic vitality and the environmental benefits of waste reduction. And again, I'm not exactly talking about recycling. We're talking about reduction. Reduce is always first, right?
Right,
And the
right.
three R's. A lot of times businesses are just like, we'd rather just recycle everything and pay for the hauler to
Yeah,
come and haul everything off. Well, I'm like, well, you've paid for it twice. You bought the product
right,
and then you paid for the hauler to to cart it
right.
off your your property. So um, why aren't we implementing reduction and
Mhm.
reuse and repair and refabrication in the business structure first before recycling is even a contender for that material, right?
Mhm,
If you're
mhm.
just going straight for recycling or even composting, food waste has its own use hierarchy that we want to use that are higher and better uses of just
Mhm.
composting, right? If we're going just for recycling and just composting, that means all those other levels higher up in the hierarchy were never considered.
Mm.
And that's what my company gets to the heart of is let's find out your waste data baseline, find out what your purchasing practices look like and change those, do the education and build out that ownership individually where people are saying, this is our program. I'm committed to following the program. And then, making sure that your company can shout it from the rooftops once you are you've got your tracking in place, and you can start showing those numbers creep
Yeah.
up for stronger recycling, even waste reduction, then that's something that you can start to use for your green marketing. This is when you start to target those top tier talent recruits, and
Hmm.
your younger millennials, your Gen Zers, are they're really dead set on working with companies that have sustainable values and that they
Absolutely.
center environmental and social justice. And if you're not ahead, riding that green wave,
Right.
then you're missing the boat whenever it comes to hiring these strong willed new hires. And if you don't snatch them up, then somebody else is going to get them. But they want to work for a company that's green and actually shows that they care about the communities that they live in, that they work in.
Yeah, can confirm, can confirm. Yeah, oh my gosh. But I mean, in on the subject of, I guess like we were talking a little bit about money before, like I
Mhm,
read that you've previously said you had to personally go, I guess like a undergo a mindset shift concerning like
mhm,
charging for your service. Like, I mean, it's your
mhm.
service is incredibly valuable. And I mean, I guess could you tell me more about that personal journey and like, I mean, other challenges that you've navigated while being a business owner?
Yeah, that was a big one for me. So before I started my business, again, I was in the nonprofit world, right, doing the door knocking, and I was a do-gooder to my core, and I would give away all my knowledge, and I would give away all my
Mm,
service. I would volunteer for everything that I possibly could if I had time for it, right? Outside of the door knocking I was already doing, and the organizing, and the legislative lobbying, and all that. So my days were filled with community service and community activism. And so whenever I started my business, I went into it with that mindset of, I'm just going to help everybody.
mhm,
What I had to learn was that I had a specific niche, and that I needed to cater to the people and spend my time, my energy, my effort, my focus on those people in that niche that needed my help. And I needed to charge what I was worth. And I had a really, really difficult time figuring out what I was worth. And it
yeah,
wasn't just a business decision, it came from a deeply seated self worth issue.
mm,
Until I fixed that, I couldn't charge what my services were really worth. Because if you
mhm,
think about how the businesses benefit after my services are completed and implemented, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that they would be saving. And I had a problem with charging $3,000.
right, yeah,
Yikes, right? So there was a big mindset shift that had to happen, and it only came through getting positive reinforcement from my clients. And whenever they agreed to pay what I actually charged, I was like, oh, you know
right,
they'll do it. Oh, okay. So that it was unfortunately, I was surprised that they would say, heck yeah,
mm,
yeah, let's do it, and they would sign on the dotted line immediately, right? So i I finally figured out that I need to be charging more, right? Because what I'm giving to them is an entire operational shift
mhm, mhm,
that they probably couldn't do on their own, not with the level of expertise that I have and the level of networking and connections that I have all across the country. So, um, I was giving them the hookup, and
yeah,
I was kind of short selling myself in the process, but I didn't realize it until my husband said, "You're giving everything away for free. Like, why are you doing this? This doesn't support a business. You don't have a
mhm,
job right now. The business is your job." And I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes
yeah,
sense." So he really called it out because he could see it from a different perspective. And the way I was going about running my business, quote unquote, was not running a business.
mm,
It was running me into the ground, is what it was
yeah,
doing. So I was so overwhelmed, and was not reaping the financial benefits. So I had to do a
yeah,
serious uh, take on my inner self, my inner worth, and just shift my perspective. And it took a lot of
mm,
inner work to do that. So now we're moving and shaking over here, and it's because not only do we think highly of our services, our customers do too, and they're willing to pay what we charge.
Hmm. And yeah, no, and that's awesome. Like I feel like especially with like I don't know if this is like it just environmental work related. Like there seems to be a trend of like, money shouldn't be the center of it all.
Hmm.
And like that is so kind of it's almost a bit of a taboo to talk about it. But in terms of like I personally really relate to that self-worth aspect. It's not even just about money, it's about our personal like health and,
Hmm.
if we're talking sustainability, like sustaining
Right.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, could I even afford to have a vacation after I've
Yeah.
run myself into the ground? Probably not,
Right.
because I wasn't charging enough to even sustain the
Mhm.
business, let alone my own paycheck. So yeah, it was a really, really hard look that I had to take at
Mhm.
myself. And so, yeah, I would recommend that for anyone to drill down on, why do you not feel worthy to accept this money, which is just an energy transfer, right? It's a
Mhm.
value
Mhm.
to value equation, is really all money is. So if you see high value and they do too, then you can charge that higher value. But if you go in with low confidence, you don't think that you can help, you're hoping and praying and wishing that they're gonna say yes. That's not the attitude to have. So
Yeah.
they need someone who's gonna come in
Mhm.
there, bust down doors, and stand there with their, say it with their full chest. We're here to help, superhero style. So that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's some of the best like things to know when starting anything and whatnot. I guess like do you have any resources or other advice that you recommend for those who are either on one side of it, like consulting or starting a business, or on the other like looking to improve their waste reduction efforts even?
Um, as far as consulting, I my best piece of advice, like I said earlier, say yes, figure it out later.
Yeah.
And never, I guess, build a box around yourself.
Mhm.
Don't silo yourself. Just because you do these kinds of consulting services doesn't mean that you can't also do an ebook,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you can't also do a webinar course. It does. You need to have multiple uh, funnels of income
Mhm.
coming in, because if one dries up, you've got these other six, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
making sure that your systems and processes are in place internally, within the business operationally, is very critical, and that's kind of a longer term goal.
Mhm.
Of course, you want to start with a uh, you know, uh, kind of a minimum value assessment of what is the one product that I can put out right now that people will buy, so that you can start building your confidence. You can build your bank, right? Your kind of war chest, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
um, of building out the funds that you're going to need in order to pay for new programs that you're going to bring online. So there's a lot to be said for that minimum viable product that you put out, your MVP, but then
Mhm.
also, while you're running that, getting everything, other silos of your business started, and managing all of those. It's like juggling, six,
Mhm.
seven balls in the air. But once you've got the confidence that you're doing things well and that there's no longer any hiccups, and you've got all your wrinkles ironed out, then you can move on to the next thing, and then you can hire and train someone to do what you were doing in that former role. And so it kind of snowballs from there, and you can start
Mhm.
building out your business, and you don't have to rely on one set of services, fully.
Yeah, for sure. Give you multiple legs to stand on, I guess. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, mhm. Yeah, and I guess this is kind of going a little bit back to earlier in our conversation, but like, do you have any like standout like case studies, I guess we could go through, like any projects that you've had recently that really stand out or are memorable and that you're proud of?
Yeah, we just did well, I say just did, back in March. There, there was a global tech company, one of the top five,
Hmm.
and they're based in Austin, or one of their offices based in Austin. And what we were able to do was a waste audit for five of the main buildings on their campus, and they have 7,000 employees daily.
Mm-hmm.
and that's not including the remote workers, right? So the people who are on site at that campus, about 7,000 employees daily. So you can imagine um, the amount of trash recyclables and the food waste
Mm-hmm.
that comes out of the kitchen and the cafeteria area as well. So we did a waste audit there. It took us 2 days
Oh wow.
to go through, all these materials, about 12 hours each day. We had a crew
Yeah.
of nine,
Yeah.
to a crew of nine
Two
subcontractors. So
days.
that didn't include me, didn't
Oh my
include my
gosh.
husband, right?
Uh-huh.
So there was 12 or 13 of us just running around sorting
Mm-hmm.
trash at these different stations and all. And so, but we had to uh, sort, weigh, catalog, photograph, video. We did a time lapse video of the whole thing. It was really cool. And we were able to draft a report for them that shows all of their waste data, where they're at, where they could go, and the ways to implement and do more staff training as well. And showing those contamination rates also across the board in each of the buildings, keeping the buildings separate, as well as the floors within each building, and then the actual waste
Yeah.
streams on each floor. So it was a lot to handle,
Yeah,
but
I'm
it was
sure.
we had a lot of really great helpers, and they really stuck with it. And it was a dirty job, but we got through it, and we were able to help that company go forth with getting they're going through the true certification process now.
That's
And
awesome.
True, if you're not familiar, True is,
Mm-hmm.
is for zero waste certification for facilities. And it's kind of like LEED for energy and water, but True is for the trash and the waste aspect. And you have to get to 90% waste diversion from landfills and incinerators. So it's a big boulder to lift, but you can't go anywhere unless you have that baseline waste data, which is what we provided them. And now they're
Mm-hmm.
moving forward with that certification process.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I guess like I just firstly thank you so much. I feel like I learned so much just in this time. I mean, like I guess like I want to just turn back some of that time a little bit. If you could like, without any butterfly effects do that and tell like maybe a younger version of yourself that like, something you've learned from life so far you wish you had known earlier, what would you say to them?
Hmm. Envision yourself as an entrepreneur. Envision yourself as a businesswoman. Why not? You know,
Mm,
I think because I'm a Gen Xer, born in the mid 70s, so we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the communications. We just grew up in our little cliques
mm,
in our neighborhood or at school or whatnot. So we didn't have this kind of global reach growing up and seeing different
yeah.
perspectives. And we were always told, not per se, but girls, sit down, shut up, and look
Mm-hmm.
pretty. That was
Mm-hmm.
our job. And I, that was something that I rejected from the day I was born, I think. So being able to be loud, be boisterous, and be your authentic self was something that I always took to heart whenever I was very young. But in my older teen and my 20s to mid 20s, uh, I there was a lot of mm, there was a lot of messaging. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to do the sit down, shut up, and look pretty kind of gig. So it was very inauthentic of me to act the way that I did to be accepted, and
Mm-hmm.
not be a target. Uh, so there was, it's just now, I think nowadays people can be, I guess, a lot more themselves. And they have support systems through online communities as well that are very that kind of you've got those cheerleaders in your corner where you've got you can build your confidence and people
Mm-hmm.
will give you those kind words of affirmation, people from across the globe that you've never met before even. So there's a lot to be said for mm, there's a lot to be said for being a pre-internet and pre-internet girl and post-internet woman.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a very unique, in our upbringing in Gen X. And
I guess if I was born in a later time, I would probably have had a lot more confidence in
Mm,
and being my authentic self, and not giving a damn what anybody thought a lot earlier on. Now I don't. I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever. Everybody's got their own opinion. You're not going to please everybody. So why try? Right. So just as long as you're focused on what you're doing and the clients you're serving and doing an excellent job at every turn so that they feel satisfied as customers and that they feel heard and seen and valued, that's all you can really do. And then also internally provide that kindness to yourself as well. I beat myself up quite a bit in my teen and years, years during college and after college of, and it wasn't very kind. Yeah, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and it'll all work out.
That's really great advice. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have to say, like, just really quick that deeply, deeply resonated for sure. Like, even regardless of the fact that I've been my whole life, experiencing the internet and whatnot. And there's some intricacies there, but we can talk for a while about that. But I mean, yeah, for listeners that want to keep up with the work that you do, or even, reach out and work with zero waste strategies, where can they find you?
Yeah, so we are at zerowaste.org. And that's the number 0, not the word. So zerowaste.org. We're on all the major socials, and you can email me. You can email us through the website, DM me on LinkedIn, whatever. But I'm pretty accessible, and I'm always checking that stuff as well to see if there's any conversations that could be had with new people I've never met or people I've known for 20 years, right? So there's always something to do on social media, and there's always conversations to be had. So whether it's advice or connections, or if it's, hey, do you know if there's a job in this local area, hit me up, I might.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Really, really, again, pleasure having you on and having this conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.